The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft weeping of distant relatives. My grandmother's casket sat heavy in the ground, the weight of grief settling on my shoulders. But it wasn't grief alone. It was a cold, sharp premonition, a whisper in the back of my mind that this was just the beginning. I saw their faces, etched with fake sorrow, their eyes darting around, calculating. They thought they had won. They thought with her gone, I was vulnerable. But they underestimated the strength of a bond forged in shared secrets and whispered stories under a starlit sky. They had mistaken my grief for weakness, and that was their first, fatal mistake. If you love your family with all your heart and would do anything to protect your mother, father, brother, or sister, subscribe to this channel right now to join a community that understands. The lawyer, a man I vaguely recognized from family gatherings, approached me just as the last shovel of dirt landed on the casket. His face was grim, his voice low. "Harper," he said, his eyes flicking nervously towards a group of my relatives. "I need you to come with me. There's something you need to see." A chill snaked down my spine. His urgency was palpable, radiating like heat from a fire. I hesitated, glancing back at my aunt, whose saccharine smile never quite reached her eyes, and my uncle, whose hand rested a little too firmly on her shoulder. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I followed the lawyer, my footsteps heavy on the damp earth, away from the throng of mourners and towards the edge of the cemetery. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper as we approached a small, unassuming building, its paint peeling, its windows dark. He fumbled with a key, the metallic click echoing in the silence, and pushed open the door. "After you," he said, his voice tight. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. A single bare bulb illuminated a small, windowless room, and that's when I saw them. They were huddled around a table, their faces illuminated by the glow of a laptop screen, their voices hushed and conspiratorial. My aunt, my uncle, and my brother. My own flesh and blood. The people who were supposed to be my family. The people I had trusted implicitly. The people who had stood beside me just moments ago, feigning grief over the loss of the woman who had raised us all. They looked up, their faces a mask of shock and something else. Fear. The lawyer cleared his throat. "I believe Miss Harper has a right to know what you've been planning," he said, his voice echoing in the small room. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of dread. What were they planning? What could possibly be so important that it required such secrecy, such deceit? My aunt's face hardened. "Harper, you weren't supposed to see this," she said, her voice sharp, the saccharine sweetness gone, replaced by a cold, calculating edge. "You wouldn't understand."
"Understand what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Understand how you're already dividing up Grandma's estate? Understand how you're planning to cut me out? Understand how you've been waiting for her to pass so you could finally get your hands on her money?" My uncle stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Don't be ridiculous, Harper," he said, his voice booming. "We're just discussing the logistics. Someone has to handle the finances." But I saw the lie in his eyes, the greed that glittered beneath the surface. My brother remained silent, his face averted, his shoulders slumped. His silence was a betrayal in itself, a confirmation of my worst fears. He knew. He had been in on it all along. My vision blurred, the room spinning. The person I trusted most was one of them. The air in the room crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. I stumbled back, knocking against a stack of dusty files, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the confined space. "How could you?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. "Grandma trusted you. We all did." My aunt scoffed, a harsh, grating sound. "Trust is a luxury, Harper," she said, her eyes glinting with something that looked like disdain. "And frankly, one we can no longer afford. Your grandmother wasn't exactly forward-thinking with her finances. We're simply trying to salvage what's left." Salvage? Is that what they called it? Gutting her legacy? Erasing her wishes? All for their own selfish gain? The betrayal cut deep, a wound that festered with each passing second. I looked at my brother, pleading with him with my eyes. "Please," I whispered, "tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't know about this." He refused to meet my gaze, his silence a deafening admission of guilt. He shifted uncomfortably, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his entire demeanor radiating shame and weakness. In that moment, I knew I was truly alone. The people I had always considered my family, the people I would have done anything for, had turned against me. They saw me as an obstacle, a threat to their carefully laid plans, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get rid of me. "Get out, Harper," my uncle said, his voice hard, his eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you. Just sign the papers and we can all move on." Sign the papers? What papers? My mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos swirling around me. "What papers?" I demanded, my voice rising. "What are you talking about?" My aunt smirked, a cruel, predatory expression that sent a shiver down my spine. "The papers relinquishing your claim to the estate, of course," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We wouldn't want you to get the wrong idea that you're entitled to anything."
Entitled? After everything I had done for my grandmother? After all the years I had spent caring for her, listening to her stories, holding her hand when she was scared? They wanted to erase me, to pretend I didn't exist, to steal everything that was rightfully mine. I refused. "I won't do it," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I won't let you get away with this." My uncle lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "You little," he began, but my brother grabbed his arm, stopping him. "Let's not make a scene, Richard," he said, his voice low. "We can handle this another way." Another way? What did that mean? A fresh wave of fear washed over me, cold and clammy. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that they wouldn't stop at mere words. They would do whatever it took to silence me, to ensure their plan succeeded. I backed away, stumbling towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out of there. I had to find a way to protect myself. As I turned to flee, I caught a glimpse of something on the laptop screen, a document titled Harper's Share. The numbers swam before my eyes, but one thing was clear. They had already decided my fate. I was to be left with nothing. Absolutely nothing. I ran. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, away from the cemetery, away from my family, away from the suffocating weight of their betrayal. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my body trembling uncontrollably. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely get them into the ignition. Finally, the engine roared to life, and I slammed the car into reverse, peeling out of the parking lot and onto the open road. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away. I had to escape the darkness that had consumed my family, the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. The following weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and mounting anxiety. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every phone call sent my heart racing. I tried to talk to my brother, to reason with him, to appeal to whatever shred of decency he might have left. But he refused to answer my calls, his silence a constant reminder of his betrayal. I consulted a lawyer, hoping to find some legal recourse, some way to fight back against my aunt and uncle's machinations. But the lawyer was grim, his words offering little comfort. "The will is airtight, Harper," he said, his voice laced with regret. "Unless you can prove undue influence, there's very little we can do." Undue influence. It was a legal term, but it perfectly captured the insidious way my aunt and uncle had manipulated my grandmother, preying on her vulnerabilities, twisting her words to suit their own selfish purposes. But proving it was another matter entirely. I had no evidence, no witnesses, nothing but my own word against theirs. And who would believe me? I was just a grieving granddaughter, emotional and distraught. They were respected members of the community, wealthy and powerful. The odds were stacked against me. I felt like I was drowning, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The weight of the injustice was crushing me, suffocating me, threatening to drag me down into the abyss. I began to question everything, to doubt everyone. Was my grandmother's passing truly natural, or had they hastened it along? The thought was horrifying,
unspeakable, but I couldn't shake it. The darkness had seeped so deep, poisoning everything it touched. I knew I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them steal my grandmother's legacy, erase my existence, and get away with it scot-free. But I also knew that I couldn't fight them head-on. They were too powerful, too ruthless, too willing to do whatever it took to protect their interests. I had to find another way, a way to outsmart them, to expose their lies, to bring them to justice. But how? I was just one person, alone and vulnerable, against a force that seemed insurmountable. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing, desperately searching for a solution. And then, slowly, a plan began to form. A plan that was risky, audacious, and utterly insane. But it was the only chance I had.
My eyes were hollow, devoid of emotion. I was a shell of my former self, a walking testament to the destructive power of betrayal. One evening, as I sat alone in the darkness, staring blankly at the television screen, a commercial came on. It was for a local charity, a place that provided shelter and support for victims of abuse. I watched the faces of the people they were helping, their eyes filled with pain and hope. And something inside me snapped. I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't let them break me. I couldn't let them win. A flicker of defiance ignited within me, a tiny spark in the overwhelming darkness. It was a fragile thing, easily extinguished. But it was enough. It was enough to pull me back from the brink, to remind me of who I was, of what I was fighting for. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I would not be a victim. I would not let them control my life. I would fight back. I opened my eyes, the fear still present, but now mingled with a newfound resolve. The first step was to gather information. I needed to know everything about their plan, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I needed to understand their motivations, their fears, their secrets. I started small, meticulously combing through every document I could find, searching for any clue, any inconsistency, any piece of information that could help me unravel their web of deceit. I spent hours online, researching legal precedents, financial regulations, anything that might give me an edge. I learned about forensic accounting, about estate law, about the art of deception. I became a student of their game, determined to master it, to use it against them. The more I learned, the more confident I became. I realized that they weren't as clever as they thought they were. They had made mistakes, overlooked details, left loose ends, and I was going to find them all. As I delved deeper into their world, I discovered a network of lies and corruption that extended far beyond my grandmother's estate. They had been involved in shady business deals, tax evasion, and even something far worse. The information was overwhelming, but I refused to be intimidated. I meticulously documented everything, gathering evidence, building a case that would expose them for who they truly were. The plan began to take shape, slowly but surely. It was a complex, intricate strategy, full of risks and uncertainties, but it was the only way. I knew that if I failed, I would lose everything, but I was prepared to take that chance. I was prepared to risk it all, because I had nothing left to lose.
That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. The nightmares were gone, replaced by a sense of purpose, a sense of control. I woke up refreshed, energized, ready to face the day. I showered, dressed in clothes that actually fit, and looked in the mirror. The hollow-eyed ghost was gone, replaced by a woman with a steely gaze and a determined set to her jaw.
I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. They had made a mistake. They had underestimated me. They had thought I was weak, vulnerable, easily manipulated. But they were wrong. I was stronger than they could ever imagine. I was more determined than they could ever comprehend. And I was coming for them. I picked up my phone, the same phone I had been avoiding for weeks, and dialed a number. It was a private investigator, a man I had found through a trusted source. His reputation was impeccable, his discretion absolute. I had already spoken to him briefly, outlining my situation, explaining what I needed. Now it was time to put the plan into action. "Hello, Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It's Harper. I'm ready." The game had begun. They thought they had silenced me, erased me, made me disappear. But they were about to discover that revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was about to serve them a feast. They messed with the wrong person, and they were about to pay the ultimate price. I smiled. I played their game. I acted the part of the grieving, defeated granddaughter. I even agreed to a meeting with their lawyer, a slick, impeccably dressed man who oozed condescension. He presented me with the papers, the same ones they had tried to force me to sign at the cemetery. "Just a formality, my dear," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Sign here, here, and here, and we can all put this unfortunate situation behind us." I took the pen, my hand trembling slightly, and pretended to read the document carefully. But my eyes weren't focused on the words. They were scanning the room, noting the position of the security cameras, the layout of the furniture, the location of the exits. Because while I was pretending to be defeated, I was actually recording everything. A tiny camera, disguised as a button on my blouse, captured every word, every gesture, every nuance of their deception. The audio was crystal clear, the video sharp and detailed. This was my insurance, my proof. The lawyer chuckled, a patronizing sound that made my skin crawl. "Such diligence," he said. "But I assure you, everything is perfectly in order." I smiled sweetly, a mask of innocence that concealed my growing rage. "Of course," I said. "I just want to be thorough." I signed the papers, my heart aching with each stroke of the pen. I was giving them what they wanted, but I was also setting a trap. They didn't know it yet, but they had just signed their own death warrants. After the meeting, I went straight to Mr. Peterson's office.
He was waiting for me, his face impassive, his eyes sharp and alert. I handed him the recording, along with the copies of the documents I had signed. "This is everything," I said. "Every lie, every manipulation, every act of betrayal." He took the evidence, his fingers brushing against mine. "Don't worry, Harper," he said. "We'll make them pay." The next few weeks were a delicate dance, a careful orchestration of events designed to expose my aunt and uncle's crimes without revealing my hand. Mr. Peterson and his team worked tirelessly, meticulously analyzing the evidence, uncovering hidden assets, tracing illicit transactions. They discovered a pattern of fraud and embezzlement that stretched back for years, implicating not only my aunt and uncle, but also a network of corrupt officials and unscrupulous businessmen. The deeper they dug, the more dirt they found. I learned that my grandmother's estate was just the tip of the iceberg. My aunt and uncle had been systematically looting the family business for years, siphoning off funds into offshore accounts, using shell corporations to conceal their activities. They had been living a life of luxury, funded by the hard work and sacrifice of generations, and they were about to lose it all. But the most shocking discovery was the truth about my grandmother's passing. Mr. Peterson's team uncovered evidence that suggested she hadn't died of natural causes. They found traces of a substance in her system, a substance that could induce a heart attack, a substance that was virtually undetectable. The implications were horrifying. Had they ended her life to expedite their plan? The thought made my blood run cold. I refused to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. I knew I had to be careful. My aunt and uncle were dangerous people, capable of anything. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I installed security cameras in my apartment, changed my phone number, and avoided any contact with my family. I knew they were watching me, waiting for me to slip up. But I was ready for them. I was prepared for anything. One of the most crucial parts of the plan involved gaining access to my aunt's computer. I knew she kept all her financial records, her correspondence, her dirty secrets on that machine. But getting my hands on it was a challenge. She was fiercely protective of her privacy, and she never let anyone near her computer. That's when I remembered Kevin, a former employee of the family business. He had been fired a few months ago after he discovered some irregularities in the company's accounting. He was bitter, resentful, and looking for revenge. I reached out to him, explained my situation, and offered him a deal. If he could help me get access to my aunt's computer, I would provide him with the evidence he needed to sue the company for wrongful termination. He didn't hesitate. A few days later, he called me with the information I needed.
He had managed to install a keylogger on my aunt's computer, a device that would record every keystroke, every password, every website she visited. I now had access to her entire digital life. The information I found was explosive. Emails, documents, bank statements. It was all there, laid bare for me to see. I spent hours poring over the data, piecing together the puzzle, uncovering the full extent of their crimes. I learned about their secret meetings, their coded messages, their network of accomplices. I discovered the names of the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the corrupt officials they had been bribing. It was all there, in black and white. I felt a surge of triumph, a sense of vindication. They had underestimated me. They had thought they could get away with anything, but they were wrong. Their time was up. The final piece of the puzzle was the press conference. I knew that to truly expose my aunt and uncle, I had to take my story to the public. I had to reveal their crimes to the world, to ensure that they were held accountable for their actions. But I also knew that I had to be careful. They were powerful people, with connections in high places. They would do everything they could to discredit me, to silence me, to protect their reputation. That's why I decided to work with an investigative journalist, someone with a proven track record of exposing corruption and holding the powerful accountable. I contacted Sarah, a reporter I had admired for years. She was tough, fearless, and dedicated to the truth. I told her my story, showed her the evidence, and asked for her help. She was skeptical at first, but after reviewing the documents and listening to the recordings, she became convinced. She agreed to help me, to use her platform to expose my aunt and uncle's crimes to the world. We planned the press conference meticulously, choosing a location that was both accessible and secure. We invited representatives from all the major news outlets, both local and national. We prepared a statement outlining the facts of the case, presenting the evidence in a clear and compelling manner. I knew that this was it. This was my chance to take them down. This was my moment of truth. As I stood behind the podium, facing the cameras, facing the world, I felt a wave of fear wash over me. But I also felt a sense of determination, a sense of purpose. I was ready. I took a deep breath and began to speak. I spoke about the years of manipulation, the theft, the lies, the potential foul play surrounding my grandmother's departure from this world. The room was silent, the reporters hanging on every word. I presented the documents, played the recordings, showed the evidence that Mr. Peterson's team had uncovered. I watched as their faces changed, as shock and disbelief turned to anger and outrage. I could feel the tide turning, the momentum shifting. My aunt and uncle, who were sitting in the front row, looked like they had been struck by lightning. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with panic. They tried to interrupt, to deny the allegations, but their voices were drowned out by the chorus of questions from the reporters. Sarah, the journalist, stepped forward and presented her own findings, corroborating my story with additional evidence she had gathered independently. She revealed the names of the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the corrupt officials who had been involved in the scheme. She exposed the full extent of their network of deceit. The press conference was a feeding frenzy. The reporters swarmed around my aunt and uncle, firing questions at them, demanding answers. They tried to escape, but they were trapped, surrounded by the media. The story went viral instantly. The news outlets splashed the headlines across their websites, their newspapers, their television screens. Social media exploded with outrage. People were sharing the story, commenting on it, demanding justice. My aunt and uncle's reputation was in tatters. Their business was crumbling. Their world was collapsing around them. But it wasn't over yet. I knew that they wouldn't go down without a fight. They were desperate.
and desperate people are capable of anything. I had to be careful. I had to be prepared for their next move. That night, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but something told me it was important. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Harper, it's me," a voice said on the other end. It was Kevin, the former employee who had helped me get access to my aunt's computer. "They know," he said, his voice frantic. "They know it was me. They're coming for me." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. "They found out about the keylogger," he said. "They traced it back to me. They're on their way here right now." I didn't waste any time. "Get out of there," I said. "Go somewhere safe. I'll call Mr. Peterson and tell him to get you protection." "It's too late," he said. "They're already here. I have to go." The line went dead. I tried to call him back, but there was no answer. I knew what this meant. My aunt and uncle were trying to silence him, to eliminate the evidence that connected them to the crime. I had to act fast. I called Mr. Peterson and told him what had happened. He was furious. "They've crossed the line," he said. "This is no longer just about money.
This is about obstruction of justice, about attempted harm." He promised to get Kevin protection and to bring the full force of the law down on my aunt and uncle, but I knew that wasn't enough. I had to do something myself. I had to set a trap that would expose them once and for all. I thought about their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their deepest fears, and then it hit me. Their biggest weakness was their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable. They thought they could get away with anything, that they were above the law. I decided to use that arrogance against them. I devised a plan that was both audacious and dangerous. I would lure them into a meeting where I would confront them with the evidence of their crimes and expose them to the authorities. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. I called Sarah, the journalist, and told her my plan. She was hesitant at first, but after hearing my reasoning, she agreed to help me. She saw the potential for a major story, a story that would bring down some of the most powerful people in the city. We decided to set the meeting at my grandmother's house, the house where it all began. It was a symbolic location, a place where they felt comfortable, a place where they thought they had control. But they were wrong. I had turned the house into a trap. I spent the next few days preparing for the meeting. I installed hidden cameras throughout the house, recording every room, every hallway, every entrance and exit. I contacted the local police and the FBI, informing them of my plan and asking for their assistance. They agreed to provide surveillance and backup, but they insisted that I not confront my aunt and uncle directly. They wanted to arrest them without any further escalation. I agreed to their terms, but I had my own plans. I knew that I couldn't rely on the authorities to do everything. I had to take matters into my own hands. I invited my aunt and uncle to the house, telling them that I wanted to discuss the estate, to try to reach a settlement. They were suspicious at first, but they couldn't resist the opportunity to try to manipulate me one last time. They agreed to come. On the day of the meeting, I woke up early, my heart pounding in my chest. I showered, dressed in a simple black dress, and looked in the mirror. I saw a woman with a determined gaze and a steely resolve. I was ready. I arrived at the house an hour before the meeting, checking the cameras, making sure everything was in place. The police and the FBI were already there, setting up their surveillance equipment, preparing for the operation. I took a deep breath and waited. At precisely 2 p.m., my aunt and uncle arrived. They looked nervous, their faces pale and drawn. They tried to act confident, but I could see the fear in their eyes. I greeted them at the door, offering them a false smile. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Please, come in." They stepped inside, their eyes darting around the room as if they sensed something was wrong. I led them to the living room, where I had set up a table with the documents and the recordings. "Let's get down to business," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I think it's time we had a little talk." They sat down at the table, their bodies tense, their hands trembling. I could feel the tension in the room, the air thick with anticipation. I was about to spring the trap. I was about to expose their crimes to the world. I reached for the remote control, ready to play the recordings, ready to reveal the truth. But then something unexpected happened. The lights went out. The house plunged into darkness, and I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. "Hello, Harper," the voice said. "We have some unfinished business to discuss." The darkness was absolute, punctuated only by the pounding of my own heart. Then a beam of light sliced through the gloom, revealing my uncle standing in the doorway, a grim smile twisting his lips. Behind him, my aunt,
her face a mask of fury. "Did you really think you could outsmart us, Harper?" my uncle sneered, advancing into the room. "We built this family, and we can break it just as easily." My aunt circled around, cutting off my escape. "You've been a thorn in our side for too long," she hissed. "It's time to remove you." I wasn't defenseless. Underneath my dress, I had a small but potent stun device. My fingers tightened around it as I acted afraid. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling as I let a tear slip down my cheek. "We want what's rightfully ours," my aunt spat. "The estate, the business, everything, and we're not going to let you stand in our way." My uncle chuckled. "You know, Harper, I always thought you were the dumbest of the bunch. I was wrong. You were just annoying." That was my cue. I lunged forward, aiming the stun device at my aunt, but she was faster than I anticipated. She grabbed my wrist, twisting it until I dropped the device with a clatter onto the floor. My uncle seized the opportunity, grabbing my other arm and pinning me against the wall. "Such a pity," he said, his breath hot on my face. "You could have had it all, but you chose to be difficult." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. My aunt and uncle froze, their eyes wide with panic, because standing behind them, filling the doorway, were Sarah and Mr. Peterson, and behind them, a phalanx of police officers, their weapons drawn. "It's over," Sarah announced, her voice ringing with authority. "You're under arrest." My aunt and uncle struggled, but it was no use. The police quickly subdued them, handcuffing them and leading them away. As they were dragged out of the house, my aunt turned to me, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You haven't won, Harper," she screamed. "This isn't over." I just stared back at her, my face impassive. It was over. They just didn't know it yet.
What they didn't know was that the stun device was a decoy. The real trap was the house itself. Every word, every gesture, every threat had been recorded, broadcast live to the news media, the police, and the world. As soon as the authorities were sure they had enough evidence, they moved in. The fallout was swift and brutal. My aunt and uncle were charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Kevin, thankfully, was safe, having been extracted just in time. He testified against them, providing damning evidence of their crimes. The press went wild, the story dominating the headlines for weeks. The family business was seized by the government, its assets frozen. My aunt and uncle's reputation was destroyed, their names synonymous with greed and corruption. They lost everything, their wealth, their power, their freedom. Even worse, the investigation into my grandmother's departure from this world was reopened, and this time they wouldn't be able to escape the consequences. As I watched their world crumble around them, I felt a sense of satisfaction, but also a profound sadness. They had brought this upon themselves, their own actions leading to their downfall. I got my grandmother's inheritance back, of course, every penny, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that the truth had been revealed, that justice had been served. In the end, my aunt and uncle were sentenced to decades behind bars. Their empire was gone, their names forever tarnished. I visited their trial every day. I wanted them to see me, to know they failed. The day the judge read the sentence, I watched their faces crumble. My aunt's carefully constructed facade of composure shattered, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. My uncle, always the arrogant one, finally understood the gravity of his situation. Their eyes met mine for a brief, fleeting moment. In that instant, I saw defeat. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.